welcome to this new episode of Spin Doctors Archive, the podcast. This time with an in-depth conversation with Chris Barron, the lead singer of Spin Doctors. I am Daniel, the creator of SpinDoctorsArchive.com, a website all about Spin Doctors, their music, their concerts, their songs, and so on. Yeah, at the end of January, I had the opportunity to talk to Chris. I was sitting in a hotel room in Dublin, Ireland, and Chris was at home in his apartment in New York City. And we talked about songwriting, Bob Dylan, Chris's brother Jeremy, who sadly passed away in 2024 and plays an important role in the Spin Doctors band history. We talked about the dynamics within the band, and we talk about the recording of Face Full of Cake, the Spin Doctors' new album, which will be released in April. So feel free to do what Chris and I did, have a cup of coffee or tea, and enjoy the conversation. Chris, great to finally have you here on the podcast. You told me you were almost a little jealous of Aaron because he did all the episodes with me, and your response to me asking you if you would record an episode with me was, I thought you would never ask. Glad you're here, and hopefully not for the last time.
Well, I hope fans of the podcast aren't disappointed with me because Aaron is like, I was laughing last night. I thought about this last night and I just burst out laughing. And Lindsay was like, "What are you laughing about?" Because I was imagining this conversation last night, and I was thinking, just by way of explanation, Aaron, his memory is so good, and I'm a big fan of the podcast. I've listened to all of the episodes. Yeah, I listened to it all because Aaron, it's just so interesting because he remembers so much stuff, and I forget how things went down. And Aaron will be like, "Yeah, Frankie LaRocca suggested this thing," and be like, "Oh my God, yeah, I forgot that was his suggestion, and that's why we did that." Or he just brings all this stuff up, or the order that things happen, that one thing happened before another, and I'm terrible at remembering that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking last night, talking to you and your regular listeners, I don't remember that stuff very well. I think
we will talk about different things, and that's completely fine.
Yes, but the thing that made me laugh was I was thinking in the history of the Spin Doctors, Aaron has been the perennial adult in the room. That just cracks me up thinking about I from that perspective of just Eric, who is very mercurial and volatile, and really comes at everything from a very almost a theoretical standpoint. He has these ideas that he wants to follow. And then I got, I'm sort of this, back then I was always stoned, and not anymore, but still I the guy with ink stains on my fingers and just sort of dreaming about some, snatch of a James Joyce, poem. And then Mark White being basically a walking stick of dynamite. and coming at life from his sort of Bronx, Queens, New York City, gonna just break some bones and take no prisoners kind of thing. And then you got Aaron, just mild mannered, kind of just, I can only imagine what it must have been like for him to just be standing in a room with the three of us. So yeah, he's always been the adult in the room.
Yeah, but this makes the great mix, the combination of the four of you. So
without a doubt,
his role was the adult, right?
Without a doubt, yeah. He's dad. And I always laugh because sometimes just thinking about he's dad in the band. Aaron is dad. I'm mom. And Eric and Mark are the kids. The dynamic's very different now with Jack in the band because we have another adult.
What's his role? He's an adult, yeah.
Yeah. It's almost now it's God, that's really funny. It's shaking things up. I mean, it's almost like me and Eric are the kids now. and like Jack and Aaron are like dad. Like Aaron is still sort of dad, but he's almost like mom now. It's almost like Jack is dad and Aaron is mom. And Eric and I are like, you know, the recalcitrant like twins, you know.
Oh, that's cool.
Eric and I take turns being like the big brother or the younger brother.
Enjoy a cup of coffee, by the way. For the listeners, we were starting our conversation without hitting record, and now we are recording. And we were talking about your brother. Your brother Jeremy passed away last year, and you were like, "Yeah, record this. He's such a big influence on the Spin Doctors, and I'd like to talk about it." So, yeah. Tell us what you think and how you feel about your brother.
My brother died August 3rd of a massive stroke, and he was an organ donor. So like he sort of had this, like, the way he died was sort of a perfect storm, where he had a massive brain injury, but the rest of his body was in perfect condition. So we kept him around. The doctors kept him around for a couple of days while they found recipients, and a number of his organs were able to be the term they use is harvested, which is kind of creepy. But anyway, they were able to get his organs to a number of people. So he had this stroke, and then was around for a couple of days. But he died August 3rd, and he and I are 2 years minus 2 days apart. So he's February 3rd, 1970, and I'm February 5th, 1968. And I am, I grew up like learning disabled. It's very difficult for me to learn how to read. I'm dyslexic, and sort of like, quote fingers impaired in a number of ways, like learning wise. And my brother is like slightly on the spectrum, Asperger's, unbelievable autodidact, read everything, was a mathematician, a geometer, and just a very, very brilliant guy. And somebody's really brilliant when they've read, like, not only read Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, but like read it multiple times. Like that's like my brother, basically, like, I grew up kind of, a smart kid who wasn't smart in a conventional kind of way. So I didn't thrive in school. I didn't get good grades, and was sort of constantly demonstrated to me that I was like a dummy. And my brother was like the guy in the trenches with me who was like, "You're just as smart as I am. You're just different." And as time went on, and I started to become a lyricist, and particularly once the Spin Doctors were like forming, my brother was like directing my reading, and was basically like a one-man university for me, So I got out of school, and once I got out of school, I started reading all the stuff that I was supposed to read in school. Mm-hmm. And once I got all those like annoying teachers out of the way, I got really interested in all this stuff. So I started reading.
Well, nobody forced you to read it, but when you really wanted to read it.
Yeah, I got really interested. So my brother turned me on to, William Butler Yeats and James Joyce and, Byron Shelley Keats, and was very adroit and hip to all these like social theories. The second verse of 40 or 50, mm-hmm.
All these possessions?
Yeah, all his possessions around him in his house, lying beside him, his companion and spouse. and in the morning you dress and go to hell, all activated by a little timer bell. That was based on a conversation I had with Jeremy about like human conditioning, and it's a philosopher. It's a specific philosopher. Of course, if Jeremy was still around, he'd be like, yes, this guy, I can't remember who it is. Maybe one of your listeners will,
if you guys know it, just let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know if you know who it is. Is the second or third verse, I think it's the second verse of someday all this will be road. Time is just a concept, says Einstein's kid the dunce. People's way of keeping everything from happening at once. Overtake the light, and time is in your sight, and black holes bend the beams, so nothing's where it seems, and finding out the truth can take you months. That's almost verbatim, like a phone conversation I had with Jeremy.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you refer to him as the prophet in some bootlegs that I remember from back in the day, or even in some liner notes from the early records, right?
Yeah, that's from Jason. Jason Richardson is our manager.
Yeah, your manager. Yeah.
And he's like, we've got two managers. David Sonnenberg is our like big time, like wheeling and dealing manager. He's the guy who got us our record deal and negotiated our publishing deal. And, he's like the pistol fingers, love you, baby, wink, wink, like, walks in the room and like decimates like the opposition and gets us like some crazy deal. Jason has been with us. He's the guy like, there's like kind of two kinds of rock and roll manager, and we have one of each. So that's the one kind. And then Jason, the other kind, is like the guy who was like around when the band first started out, and like somebody like roped into like, going to the photocopy shop and like copying flyers and handing out flyers, hanging up posters. And that's Jason. So Jason, like,
doing all the practical stuff to get you started and to get you in the business, right?
Exactly. So that's Jason. He's been with us like almost since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And Jay is from Jersey City. He's got this like kind of working class background, and very colorful Italian American kind of family, and just everybody has a nickname. Everybody has a nickname. So I'm the Space Cadet, and Aaron
the Space Cadet. Okay.
The Space Cadet. Yeah. These nicknames are just like chef's kiss, Aaron is Baby Buddha, and Eric's was Schmitty, and Schmitty, and he hated it. Yeah, we couldn't call him that. Like,
okay, never say Schmitty to Eric. Okay,
I think he's cool with it now. I think he thinks it's funny now, but back then he was much more irascible. Back then, we have a sort of a happier, gladder Eric in the modern era. He's always been a goddamn delight, but we were all a lot more difficult to get along with back then, except for Aaron, who's always been just a fucking constant delight consistently the whole time.
Do you remember Mark's nickname?
Yeah, Mark was the Ragman.
The Ragman.
The Rag Man, yeah. Because he's like ragging on everybody. Ragging is like an American slang term for haranguing and giving someone shit, basically. So he used the Rag Man. But
so
also
Jason named
Man.
your brother the Prophet.
And Jay was just like, and so Jeremy actually was a roadie for us for a few weeks, and he was certainly like the worst roadie that ever lived. He was just like, he's trying to carry an amplifier, but he had like, some book in his hand some math textbook, or some text on Stafford beer or some, modern philosopher. And he dinged up Eric's amplifiers and just like I basically fired him because I couldn't watch him struggle like that, and we were also young. We didn't know we all knew what we were doing. The Spin Doctors, the members of the band all knew, from the get-go that we were going to be the Spin Doctors. But, at that age, a lot of people don't really know where they're going with their lives. And Jeremy, like, I think you get a job at that point in time. You think, okay, maybe this is my career. So Jeremy was like, I don't know, maybe I'm going to be like a roadie now. And he was.
I mean, you were in an age where like 2 years age difference matters a lot. Yeah, you were in your early 20s. He was mid-20s.
Yeah, I would have been. I mean, he would have maybe been 19 at that point in time.
Oh, really? That early? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was 20 when I moved to the city. When the Spin Doctors formed, I was 20.
Oh, yeah. He was the younger brother, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So he would have been 18 when I moved to the city. And by that time, I'd only been in the city for like a year or something. So he might have been 19 years old. Mm-hmm. So John Popper had to have a talk with Jeremy and be like, hey, just because you're not a good roadie doesn't like, just look at yourself, Jeremy. You're probably not cut out to be a fucking roadie,
So Popper pretty much told the same to your brother that your brother told you about learning.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. That's a very perception. Yeah. So yeah, Jeremy, if you like that aspect of my lyrics, the sort of scholarly references and some of the more highfalutin aspects, you have my brother to thank for it.
So we thank him a lot for that, and his
yeah. I mean, unless you think it's a bit much, which I wouldn't blame anybody for thinking it's a bit over the top.
As I told you years before, this was one of the things that made me get into your music, and the lyrics were completely different to all the other stuff that I heard as a kid in Germany. And what the hell were pterodactyls, and why is he singing about the Guildensterns and Rosenkranzes and so on? In a way, I learned English thanks to your music and to the lyrics. So also thanks to your brother, I guess.
That's when you told me that, I was really knocked out. It was such a wonderful compliment. If I remember the story correctly, you told me that you were very interested in learning English, and as an exercise, you were translating pop songs. And then
correct. This was the way to do it, because we had like in the former DDR, we had like Russian. No one wanted to learn Russian, but we had to. And then after the wall came down, I started learning English, and suddenly it made sense to learn another language because you could understand what was on the radio. And then there was Two Princes, and I was like, okay, what's the song about?
That's so cool. And then you said that you got into How Could You Want 'Em, you could have me, and you're like, wait a minute, this is a whole other kind of level of
the Shakespeare reference was like, whoa, in a rock song.
Yeah, I mean, I came out of another thing that my brother and I both really liked was Bob Dylan, and
I just saw the movie last night, the new one, and I wanted to ask you about Bob Dylan.
I'm such an ass about stuff like that. I mean, I saw a poster, and it's what's his name? Timothy Chalamet. Yeah, and he's holding this like archtop, like sunburst archtop guitar.
Yeah,
and I like Bob never had that guitar. Like, because I know like all the guitars that Bob had, and I was like, Bob never played an archtop. Not only did he never play archtop, it's completely fucking wrong.
But seriously, I love the movie. It's not out in Germany yet, but it's out here in Ireland. I'm in Dublin at the moment, and
did you like it?
I really liked it, and what made me think about talking to you about not about the movie, but about Dylan in a way is that. Dylan was portrayed as a guy permanently writing stuff on notes and working on songs and trying out melodies and getting up in the night and fiddling around on the guitar. And I was like, this is how I imagine your work actually. So writing all the time. And I wanted to talk with you about your way of songwriting actually.
I go through phases where I'm like that. And when I was younger, I was absolutely like that. When I was younger, I gradually over the years, I have formed kind of what I think of as like a conveyor belt.
Hmm.
And I only recently I've heard the term workflow, but like I always associated that with like corporate
Yeah,
asshole bullshit, But another book that my brother turned me on to, I think it's called The Art of Note Taking, and I can't remember the author. Introduced me to the idea of like creative workflow, and like so it's something I've been doing my whole career. I just didn't realize like that it fell under the auspices of this term workflow. Um, which I still feel like an asshole saying like workflow, but people used to ask me like, you know, how do you write songs? Do you
yeah.
write like the lyrics first? Do you write the music first? And my answer is like to how do you write songs is like basically like by hook or by crook, which means like sometimes I write lyrics, sometimes I write music, and sometimes I'll sit down and write the lyrics and the music at the same time. But the idea is I do a lot of free writing.
Mm.
Um,
So kind of like morning pages stuff, like
morning pages,
what's in your mind. Yeah.
Yep, morning pages. A lot. If you want to learn to write really well, it's very counterintuitive. But if you want to learn to write well, you have to learn to write badly. Which is to say, I can show you here, because we're on a Zoom, but the listeners.
Yeah, well, on a Zoom, the listeners can't see it, but okay. I'm looking at lots of notebooks.
This is like I've filled all of these notebooks,
Wow.
and that these up here too. I mean, I don't know how many are there. And
Amazing.
here's a notebook, right here, and you'll notice like I have like these paper weights to hold the paper down, so I don't have to like hold the paper down with my hand, just to keep things moving. I'm very like specific about. I love these Pilot filter felt tip pens. Very specific. I'm not specific about like I'm not saying that there's a particular pen or notebook that is the best pen or notebook to use, but if you like a certain pen or notebook, use it. Like there's a great book called Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, and it's the book that really got me started in terms of like the nuts and bolts of the actual writing. A lot of the influences that I draw from come from Jeremy and the stuff that Jeremy got me to not only read but to study, But in terms of the mechanics of writing, a lot of it comes from this book, Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. And so a lot of what I'm telling you right now is just basically, Natalie Goldberg 101. And, she talks about, it doesn't matter if you want to do it on a typewriter, if you want to do it in a notebook, what kind of pen you use. Try not to get too precious about that. But if you find something that works for you, definitely use it. So like I like these felt tip pens. I've been using them since high school. I cycle through like different notebooks that I like to use. A lot of them you saw like I have like for a long time I wrote in these like spiral notebooks. Her example was like she likes to go to the stationery store and at like Thanksgiving, right before school starts, like in September. And she was like, I like to buy like the book was written in the early 80s or something like that. She was like, I like to buy like Peanuts and like Garfield and like, funny cartoon character ones, because she's like, I pull out like a Garfield notebook and I don't feel like I have to write, the great American novel. And so basically like these pages are like, you just have to give yourself permission to write like the worst garbage ever fucking written. And what it trains you to do is to like move through your emotions and to write from a very like visceral place, because like all the stuff I'm talking about with Jeremy, all the stuff that Jeremy taught me, and all the James Joyce and Shakespeare and all that stuff, it doesn't mean shit if it isn't coming from a very visceral, you need to like cut down to the bone. If you're gonna, just like don't fucking bother writing if you're not going to like, give something of yourself. So all of this is like all the intellectual stuff is the reason that stuff is interesting is because those writers wrote emotionally and beautifully about their true feelings. So you're not trying to like, the worst thing is like, to be like, I'm quite contented to take my chances against the Guildensterns and Rosencrantzes. Like, that's like that line. The point of that line isn't that I mention Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. The point of that line is not that I like bring Hamlet into the conversation. Although that is like great. I mean, that's really good. That's killer that I did that. But the point is that I'm supporting the plaintive, like cri de coeur, cry of the heart of the protagonist. Like, how could you want him when you could have me? The point is to, frame that pain as beautifully and as plaintively as possible. So, like, the worst thing in the world is to listen to a lyric that's like, ornamental for the sake of for ornament's sake. I want people to be like, I want someone to like not understand Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, but get that. I want them to be like, wait a minute. So I don't know who Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are, but they're probably assholes. They're probably not as cool as this guy. As they're probably not as cool as the protagonist of the song. That the antagonist of the song should hopefully realize, that he's cooler. Whoever they are, he's definitely cooler than them. And so the point of the spontaneous writing is to get you used to pushing yourself into. So you're like writing, and because you're keeping the pen moving, you're like, oh, I'm an asshole. I'm tired. This is stupid. Why am I literally have stuff that's like this. I'm an asshole. Why am I doing this? I'm the worst writer in the world. This is dumb. This is dumb. This is dumb. What am I doing? The light is coming through the window and it's touching the notebook with sad gray feathers, and the rats of my heart are reaching for the cheese of my mind, and the wind is blowing into the sail of my cottage, and I'm not sure if it's going to blow out the candles or burn the thatched roof off of my straw hat, and you're like starting to get somewhere. I don't know, that's like probably maybe something.
Yeah, I see.
I don't go back to that.
You start with some random stuff, and suddenly it starts working in your brain, and you imagine certain things, and you get started in a way, right?
And you get started, yeah, exactly. And then when the time comes and you're really trying to write something, that immediacy is there, and you've trained yourself to like. When you're really trying to write something, you train yourself to go after something and not be afraid, not be like, oh, if I write this, I'm going to sound crazy. Because a lot of times those lines where you're like, that's weird, I'll go back and I'll rewrite that later. And you go back to it and you're like, whoa, that's the best shit in the song. For example, I mean, the best example of that is Two Princes. I mean, I wrote Two Princes when I was 19 years old, and had a conversation with my friend Dave Wilder's big brother, Mike It. And I was talking about a young woman that I liked, and I thought she might be mad at me, but she called me up and asked me to meet her. And I was like, well, maybe after all this time she likes me. And Mike It kept saying, well, go ahead with that. Just go ahead. Just go ahead now. Just go ahead with that. And I went home and I pulled out a notebook. Back then I was writing on those yellow legal pads, and I was writing with Schaefer fountain pens and the blue ink, that beautiful blue Schaefer ink. I have this notebook somewhere. And I wrote down 1, 2, princes kneel before you, princes who adore you. And I stopped and I was like, that's fucking stupid.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't like it?
And I was like, that's fucking stupid. And then I was like, you know what? And I was working with this technique, and I was like working with the idea of like a creative voice and an editing voice. And what I've been talking about is the creative voice, that creative voice, just allowing it free reign and letting it go. So I recognized, the editing voice being like, that's fucking stupid. And I was like, okay, hello, editing voice. Thank you for your input. You just sit tight. We're just going to see where this goes. And I wrote fucking 2 Princes,
Yeah.
It's like, it's not the best song ever written, but it is certainly like the reason why I'll never have to like do something besides write songs again.
Yeah, and writing this made definitely an impact on your life. There's a different aspect that I'm really, really interested in. When you sent me, for the listeners, for the context, when you sent me all those parcels during the pandemic with all the old tape of yours and some stuff that where you were recording and thinking about songs and trying out stuff, and sent it to me because you wanted to get rid of it and didn't want to throw it away. I was listening to some of those old tapes of yours where you were trying out songs and writing and working on ideas, and there was one thing, must have been from like 2001 or even earlier, an old tape of yours, and this was what became "She Don't Love Me Anymore," which is a song of the new album. So there were some ideas and some words and even the first structure of the song. And it's like about 20 years ago, and it never came to my mind until then that songs might take like years or even decades to come to life and to get finished. So tell me about that. Is that common for you, that you work on a song for a long time, or do you put it away and you go back to it when you need it, or when you are interested in? How does that work?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and such a valuable perspective for a songwriter, especially if you're just starting out and you don't have the perspective of like years and years and years. But basically, to go back to the idea of workflow,
mm-hmm.
If I have an idea, I take it as far as I can. So, like I might not be able to finish a song, but I will try and get as much of an idea down as I can. That means like, if I can think of some music for it, I will. If it's just a lyric, I'll write as much of the lyric as I can. Because sometimes you just have like one line and you're like, that's all you got,
Mm-hmm. There's one line and you think that this would make a good song.
Yeah, look, here's something I wrote probably 2 days ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this down in my note. I put it in a note in my phone, and this is all that's there. He doesn't have to buy you diamonds. He owns the mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I had, But I sat there and I was like, is there anything else? Went back to sauteing escarole, for dinner. Because there was nothing else there, But then like the thing I sent you the other day, that rap.
Yeah. So for context, Chris sent me a kind of a rap song, a cappella thing that was like 6 minutes, and it was fantastic. And it was like 6.5 minutes in a way, of course.
Yeah, and I sent you 9 verses. There's 10 verses. I wrote 10 verses.
Like 6 minutes of you rapping.
Yeah, and like, I mean, it just kept coming and coming and coming, and I was like, as long as there's like stuff coming, you can always have more than you need. You can always cut stuff. Who knows? Maybe like Lindsay was like, "It's 6.5 minutes long. You're gonna have to cut some stuff." And I was like, "Fat chance." I'm leaving I'm just leaving all of that in there. Maybe I'll do a radio edit at some point. That's definitely going on the next. It's a song called "It's On." But I mean, for example, and that happens sometimes too. I'll just end up like I have an idea and I'll write reams and reams and reams of stuff to it. There was no music to that one. I think probably that'll end up having a very minimal accompaniment anyway because it's a rap, song. So I don't know. Who knows where that's going.
You need to finish the sentence. It's going on the next what? On the next solo album? Is there even talk about the next Spin Doctors album?
Yeah, probably on the next Spin Doctors album.
Ah, cool.
It's so
I love the fact that you're already thinking about the next Spin Doctors album.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the next one while we were making the last one.
Fantastic.
Like just to go back to your question.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, we worked with Danny Korchmar on You Gotta Believe in Something. And he was really instrumental for me working with him. I was coming off of, this really big hit record. It was still Two Princes and Little Miss Can't Be Wrong and Pocketful of Kryptonite, even though we'd made a record in the intervening time. That was still like in my young life, still relatively recent. And I was sort of struggling between these opposing impressions that I was some kind of genius and, I was just like, my shit didn't stink and I could just like write anything and it would be a hit. And at the same time thinking like, I'm done and I'll never write another hit again. And how am I going to repeat the success of this first record? And those are completely opposite thoughts, but that was what was going through my head. And Danny just got me back to just like, sweating and working really hard and rewriting things and, editing. But another thing that he said was like, basically he didn't say it in these words, but he's like, songs don't expire. Like, you don't just like all these tunes, you dig up something old, 10 years old, doesn't matter. Well, if it's good, it's good. If it works, it works, like he was like, anything you got lying around, show it to me, and up until then I thought, I don't know what I thought, it was kind of a weird thought,
but I like that thought. If a song touches you, you don't care about did the guy who wrote it write it like 10 years ago or did he write it yesterday?
Yeah, exactly. It's the same person and you can rework it. It's parts of it don't work anymore, and like, I also, so for one thing, yes, like I'll have a song. I get the idea as far as I can, and then I try and put it somewhere where I can find it and know what it is. I try to like remember if I record something. I've been kind of woefully remiss about this, but you probably noticed on some of those tapes, I give myself a little guitar lesson. I was like, I'm like, this is capo on the 4th fret, and it's kind of the G position, and I'm hammering down on these two strings to do that G C kind of thing. And I explained to myself how I played it. So because I'll come back to it later, and I'm not the kind of guy who's very good at like remembering how I played stuff.
It's so great to see how those songs come to life, and maybe like you have this idea and you come back to it like years later, and you start working on it again where you left off, and the song might be 10 years old, but it's still new in a way that you think the time is now right to bring it to life or to finish it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it goes both ways. You might think that. On one hand, you're like, a song is really old. Maybe it's not relevant anymore. Maybe it's not good anymore. Maybe it's expired somehow. And by the same token, you think, as you're writing along in notebooks and stuff like that, and these ideas are moving along, you think that they're all completely like distinct from each other and not like relevant, and you can't really hang them together. But the truth is, like, there's a certain kind of consistency in your mind, and you're going along and you're like, you go through a notebook and you're like, oh, I was really thinking about, a particular thing, a theme at the time. And for me, it's a lot of times like, Pocket Full of Kryptonite. In that era, I was writing my pockets a lot. Like, I got a pocket full of kryptonite, and from
There's a hole in my pocket.
Freeway in the Plains. Freeway in the Plains. Like, there's a hole in my pocket. There's a brand new ruby charm and silver light. There's a lot of like, and in my notebooks, there's a lot of like pocket like metaphors.
I never thought about that, actually. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's just like it's just on my mind, and just like have these motifs that I'm sort of like returning to in a period of time. And for a long time, I thought I'd go through and I'd be like, oh man, you're so limited. You're limited. You don't have like new ideas. And then I was in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and there's one floor that's just like, I got to this one floor and it's like, that Van Gogh style with those thick brush strokes, just big chunks of paint. And it was these like sort of, brindle hashings of like brown and green and black. And I was like, what is this? And I looked at the sign next to one of the paintings. It said undergrowth. And like next to it is a similar painting. I look and it's like undergrowth. And I back up and I look, and the whole fucking room is like undergrowth. And the Van Gogh Museum is really interesting because they've got his like primary works, but they've got like a lot of secondary and tertiary works, like not as main shit. Like they've got a lot of his stuff that.
So not the singles, but the deep cuts.
Yeah, they got the deep cuts in there. And this whole fucking room is like undergrowth. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, that motherfucker was like taking an easel and like leaning down and looking at the shit that was like growing at the base of trees. Undergrowth is like the weird scrubby crap that's growing along the floor of the forest. Yeah. And he was painting after painting after painting. This isn't lilies, this isn't like Starry Night. This is just like, these are not famous paintings. This is not his best shit. But he's again and again, and he's doing like 20 canvases of like undergrowth. This guy was obsessed with the weird scrubby crap that was growing at the bottom of the trees. And clearly he's fucking Vincent van Gogh. And it got him somewhere. He was getting somewhere as he was doing that. And that to me was like, okay, if I need to write about pockets, or I need to write about sunsets, or I need to write about like the same thing is coming up again and again and again, like fine, that's you have to trust that it's going somewhere. And a really great example of that I recognize that kind of working in is that Beatles documentary, the Peter Jackson shit. What was it called?
I can't remember the name right now.
The one about the making of Let It Be.
Yeah.
And there's long periods of time. It's like you're just watching, like it's like 6 hours long, and like 4 hours of it is the Beatles sucking. It's the Beatles. It's the Beatles like sitting there playing like Besame Mucho and like old Gene Vincent songs, and they're just like playing the shit that's like not very good, and they don't know where they're going, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're a little bit annoyed at each other. But you know what they're not is like they're not bummed that they're just sitting there doing weird shit. You know what I mean? They're not. Yeah. They're completely. You can see that they're completely confident that this is going to end up somewhere. And you see the stuff with Paul, where he's saying like, "Oh, we're gonna go up on the roof and play this. Watch, when we get in front of people, this shit is gonna come alive." And that's a 27-year-old guy who like understands his process and understands that he's got to like kind of work his way towards something. Like doing that thing, the version of Get Back where he's just sitting there.
I think Get Back is the title of it of the documentary.
Oh yeah, I think it is. I think it is Get Back. You gotta kind of, this discussion brings me to the next element of all of this, and this is circling back to Jeremy. The reason why Jeremy was so helpful, and the reason why like reading James Joyce and Shelley and Byron and Keats and all these guys. The reason that stuff is so useful is because stylistically and technically it's super fucking tight. And also like Shakespeare, that stuff is super fucking tight. And if you can wrap your head around, and Bob Dylan, you could wrap your head around what's going on there and internalize that. What it does is it gives you good taste. And I see like a lot of people who have like raw talent, but they don't have very good taste. So they don't know where to take it all. And they don't know where it ends. They don't know like where the goalpost is. So honestly, like I think one of my strengths, and I thank Jeremy for this, is that I've read all this stuff. I've read it all not to be cute and not to look smart, although I like being cute and looking smart. You know, I mean, that's a great feeling. But the point of it all is when you internalize that stuff, it helps you to have good taste. And there's like, I can't remember if it's like Hume or one of these like philosophers who, you know, writes about the role of taste in art. And it's like something people don't talk about very much, but it's so important to have good taste. And I'm going to qualify that with like, when I critique what I'm doing, or if I'm having a conversation with somebody else about what they're doing, I never use terms like good and bad. You know, I never say this is good, that's bad. I always say this is strong, this is weak, this is sound, this is unsound, this is complex, this is simple, this is dense, this is light. You know, I always try to like keep it. I always try to like choose axes that are based on like real data, you know, real, like something that's actually like a thing. Because good, bad, like who can define what's good and bad, you know? But good and bad arrive as an afterthought to like sound and unsound, you know, to like busy or simple, you know. And you need to you're much better off working.
It's way more constructive to talk about art like that, right?
Especially in your own mind, you know, where you're like, it's so easy to discourage yourself.
I think this is a perfect full circle moment. We're back to Jeremy. We're back to the beginnings of you writing songs to bring this podcast episode to a close. We need to, if you want, we need to do this again and to talk more later.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But sure. I don't want to end this episode without looking forward to Face Full of Cake. So the final question.
Great, yeah.
There will be a lot of talk, I think, in the coming weeks and days ahead of the album, about the album. But what I'm really interested in is, what do you like the most about the Spin Doctors' new album?
My favorite albums were made in like a Camelot kind of environment. You know, those like Beatles records where they're just like at Abbey Road Studios. You get the sense that there's just like a playground, you know, and they're in there with like, you know, George Martin, and they're just like, you know, finger painting in there. And the Led Zeppelin records that are made, you know, in a house in Wales, and even like Exile on Main Street is like maybe my favorite album of all time, and it's made at Keith Richards' house. I read a book about that, and it turns out that was like, I don't know how much fun that was for anybody who wasn't like Keith Richards, because it sounds like it was a pretty arduous, you know, process. But I've always been like really into the albums that were like made, you know, everybody's living in a house, or everybody's kind of like sequestered in a certain kind of, either like actually in the domicile where the thing's being made, or just an emotional kind of domicile. And this record was like, we made it at Jack Daly's studio in Asbury Park. Asbury Park has a certain kind of like, you know, rustic romance, working class kind of romance to it. And I got down there and it was right about this time of year, and I was doing dry January, which I do every year. So I'm like not drinking right now either. And I like got to the hotel, a great hotel, the Asbury, and I was like, "Where's your gym?" And they were like, "We don't have a gym, but our bar is open until 2:30 a.m." And I was like, "Excuse me." And I went out to the car and I Googled like hotels near me, and was like, I think it's called the Asbury Surf Club, and I called them up and I was like, "Do you guys have a gym?" And they're like, "Yeah, we have a whole floor. It's a gym." I'm like, ooh, I'm like, how much is it a night? And it was like $250 more a night than the place we were staying. And they were like, "But do you have a platinum Amex?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, then it's, $150 more a night than the place we're staying." And I was like, I called Jason and I was like, "Jay, I'm moving to this other hotel. It's costs more. We'll figure it out. I'll pay the difference after, whatever." And so I go to this hotel and it's like beautiful, like just killer. Like my view is gorgeous. The gym is great. My room is like beautiful. It's got a bookshelf with like all these books in it that says like take a book if you want it. And like and the lobby has this like beautiful little like restaurant. And like I go into the session the next morning and I'm like, "Guys, I like moved to this other hotel. It's so nice." And Eric and Aaron are like, "I want to move there." So like, they all moved there that night. And so I didn't have to pay the extra money. Like the band paid the extra money because we all moved to this other hotel. Fantastic. And so in the morning, we're like seeing each other in the morning in our robes just down in the lobby. Mm-hmm. It's like one of those hotels was like part hotel rooms and then part like people actually lived there. And so we're just like down in the lobby, like drinking coffee together, like it was like we were living together. And then we'd all get in Aaron's like beautiful Porsche and drive like a half a mile to the studio. And it was just very, very insular. We were basically like living together.
In a bubble, like working, living, and creating music together, right?
Exactly. Absolutely in a bubble. And we just had this really great, we ate like, there's this place that had like this great chili. We had that for lunch every day.
You're always mentioning the chili on social media.
It was Jack and chili. Yeah, it was really, really good. And like we had, we're doing all the songs like, do you have the demos of the songs?
No, I don't know the demos.
I'll send them to you. They're all just like iPhone, like it's all just iPhone recordings. They're all on my phone. I'll send them to you. They're just like, they're really, really rough and ready. But they all had like, the real bones and like the details and the things that we needed to do. So we like, basically like I'd type out the lyrics. We'd stand in the control room, listen down like from our iPhone of the thing. I would point out to Eric, like, make sure you get like this thing, like this thing, this little guitar thing here. When I do this, you do that. We would just sort of like talk it through, and then we would go into the recording room and we were nailing these tunes and like we do it like 1, 2, 3 times. Most of these are like the third take. And, it was just really great working with Jack. He's like, just such a brilliant player. And I, for one, like, I wrote like 5 of these songs myself. So it was kind of like teaching the band the songs on the fly in the studio, which is kind of nerve wracking. I mean, I know, like, I don't know how people listening to this would think of me, you might think like, I've been writing songs my entire life, and like I've been working with these guys forever, and I would just walk in and be like, "Okay, this is how the song goes." But I'm still like nervous, in a session. Like I go in and I'm like, I know these guys like the song, but I'm still like, I don't know, maybe if I don't teach it to them right, they'll just decide it's stupid and they won't want to do it. I don't know what the fuck I'm thinking.
You want them to not only like it, but to get it and to perform it in a certain way, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And I was, change. I like you do the demo of it, and like singing it a certain way, but then you get with a band and it's much louder. And so I had to change the key. Sometimes I had to make it lower. Sometimes one of the songs, I think Rock and Roll Heaven, I had to change keys like 3 times,
Oh, okay.
and, like the guys were like, okay, I was like, can we take it down? Can we take it up? Like change this. Can we try it in A? Can we try it in B? Finally, I think it ended up in B, and they're just like, yeah, no problem. Cool. And what's this chord? And I actually, like, one of the chords, I was like, they're like, what chord is this? I was like, it's a flat 4. And then I got home that night and I was like, flat 4? It's the 3. Like, there is no flat 4. There's fucking 3. So like, and I was like, everybody was like really, really cool. My favorite thing about this record is that when I listened to it, we got records that were really like pulling teeth. And when I listened to them, I remember like the pulling teeth. Like Nice Talking to Me was very difficult, labor intensive record to make. And but Pocket Full of Kryptonite had that same kind of Camelot kind of feeling. I listened to Pocket Full of Kryptonite, and I just remember, like, it was Hanukkah and we had like a menorah, and Aaron was like, we were lighting the menorah and Aaron was like saying the prayers and stuff like that. That's what I remember making that record, and just being like us all just walking around like, oh my God, we're making a real live record. And this record felt the same way. And one more thing about it too is we were like, we saw it as a demo session. We were just trying to make demos of these songs. But gradually, by like the 3rd day, we realized like that we very well might be making the record.
This is in a way a bit similar to If the River Was Whiskey, right? You weren't aware that you're on an album when you did this as well. But this time you've been in a different studio, and of course 10 years later. Huh?
If the River Was Whiskey, man, I don't remember. I remember us trying to like nail that. I remember we were just sort of like,
okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
Aaron was like, you were like demoing, and while listening to the stuff, you were realizing, well, this could make this could be the album.
Maybe actually, like that kind of rings a bell. We made that record. That record was really fast, and yeah, maybe we were just trying to demo it, and then we're like, fuck it, this sounds great. Let's just do this. That was a different.
This time
kind
around, it was kind of a similar experience, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. That was a bit of a different kind of fuck it. This sounds great. Like, that was like, this is rough, but that's good. And this was like, this sounds fucking dynamite. Like, you know what I mean? This sounds better than a demo. So yeah, I mean, that's my favorite thing about the record, is that when I listen to it, I think it sounds like the process that I just described. When we made Turn It Upside Down, Jim Dickinson said, basically, like, if you're bored while you're making a record, that boredom is the loudest sound on the recording.
Whoa. Okay.
And that goes for like frustration, or, the best records are made, I think, when people are deeply engaged with the mood of the record. I mean, some records have a lot of aggression on them and whatever. I mean, you don't have to be like happy per se to make a record, but there was like an intensity about an intensity and like a, joy and a cohesion about that moment. And to me, when I hear that record, that's what I hear.
Fantastic. So I'm really crossing my fingers that a lot of people will listen to the album and will dig it and will love it as much as I do already, because I was fortunate enough to listen to it already. So
I hope so.
All the best for you guys, and here's to a great year 2025 for this.
And Daniel, I just want to say to the listeners too that, like, I keep wanting to insert this, like, so the listener should know, Daniel, like, that you are this like dramaturgical kind of character in, like, in the latter era of the Spin Doctors guys. Daniel has been so instrumental helping us out. Like, he always has like the version of the song that we're looking for at his fingertips. Daniel knows more about the Spin Doctors than the Spin Doctors do, and I'm so grateful to you. You guys don't even
You have
know.
no
Like,
idea how much I love doing this for you guys.
I WhatsApp Daniel like, hey, do you like remember this song? And it's like Daniel's like, well, it's in the Google Doc that I sent you, and I'm like, can you send me that link again? I don't know where it is. Daniel's so patient, and he's got it all at his fingertips, and like, dude, I was just like, I don't know what I would do without you.
You know what my favorite situation was with you guys? Back in, I think it was 2011 or something like that. I was on a working trip in the Ukraine. I was drinking vodka with some journalists over there. And for us, it was almost midnight. And you guys were rehearsing in the studio for If the River Was Whiskey, and you needed some recordings of the old blues tunes. And Aaron was like, well, and you were like, do you have a recording of this? And I was like in the middle of nowhere in Lviv trying to get on a Wi-Fi somewhere to find the recordings and to send them to you. And we're like, amazing, thank you. No, not this one. Do you have the shotgun version, not the shuffle version?
Oh yeah.
And you know, I was like in the Ukraine. I was like, this is the craziest situation ever. But I loved it, being a fan that turned into your kind of a hobby archive guy or something like that. So my pleasure.
You're the guy, man. You're the guy. I mean, guys. I mean, I had like. Daniel sort of referred to this earlier, but I had like a, I guess, was it 2 or 3 boxes?
Yeah, I think 3 or even more. I guess.
It was 3 or 4 boxes of like cassettes and CDs and all kinds of like demo stuff.
Dat cassettes, the old dats.
Yeah, dats. It's like all stuff that like, I mean, and like the cassettes from my entire career of just me working and like writing all these tunes, like it would be a bummer if that stuff got lost. Like,
absolutely,
you know, and like I mailed it to Daniel. I was just like, Daniel, do you want the stuff? And Daniel was like, yes. And he's like, digitally archived all of it.
I'm not done yet. A lot of it, but there's still plenty to get archived. But it was like traveling into the band's brain and into your brain, and to see how the songs came to life. And I felt so honored to be able to do this. When imagine this little guy sitting in Germany, being 14 years old when Two Princes hit the airwaves, and being a fan of that band. And like 25 years later, we're doing this. So this was emotional for me as well.
Well, from our end, you know, to have somebody who cares enough about our music and thinks enough about our music that it's worth to kind of like work and study and archiving that you have like put into it, is like, it's just an incredible kind of endorsement. So, you know, we love you. I love you. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure. And here's to many more years of doing this together.
All right. Yeah. And if the fans don't hate this episode, well, let's do another one.
I have the idea that they won't hate it. Chris, thank you so much for all your time talking with me sitting in a hotel room in Dublin, you sitting at home drinking coffee. Let's do this again if you want.
Yeah, sooner the better.
Great.
All right, I'll talk to you in an hour. Just kidding. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
So much for our conversation. I hope it was as interesting for you as it was for me. If you want to support us, please subscribe to this podcast. Give it 5 stars on Spotify or Apple, and visit the website spindoctorsarchive.com. Visit it regularly to find out all about the band's new album, Face Full of Cake. It will be out this April. And if you want to delve deeper into the band's discography, do it like Chris and listen to all the previous episodes, in which we take a close look at all the releases together with Aaron Comas, the band's drummer. I am Daniel. Thanks for listening. Until next time, Mau be ciao, people.
Yeah. Everybody say yeah. Everybody say hell yeah. Yeah. This beats TV, doesn't it?